What is going on, guys? It's Travis. We're back with another Hero's Journey live stream. And in this live stream, we are going over the age old debate: which surfboard tail for your surfboard is the best? Because you got many options, only got like 4 or 5 options, and they're all pretty great, but certain scenarios make them better or worse for certain conditions, certain types of boards, etc. We're just doing a quick um, check on the audio, and per Murphy's Law, we are having some technical issues. JK, we're not. But for some reason, it's actually not showing up now if I'm live or not. It says I'm live, I click it, and then there I am. And I sound great. And I look great. Little ZV1. Little ZV1. Wow, that looks amazing. And we're live streaming with the ZV1 Sony ZV1, and it could be the new best live stream camera ever. I am going to keep trying other things, and I love, this channel is all about camera tech, surfing, sports, the hero's journey, your journey to finding your best gear, your best tech, and making do with what you have, what you want, and then excelling and succeeding in that. So let's go through the surfboard type of tails, because there I would say there's three main ones, and these three main ones are the Swallow. And no, this is a G-rated show today, so you don't get any funny business in the chat. So we have the Swallowtail, which is a V. We'll do a little writing here. So the Swallowtail is generally like this. You see it on the thumbnail. This is a very deep swallow. It basically has 2 points at the end of the surfboard. So that's a swallowtail. Swallowtail. Then you have the, I would say, classic. Now this is a bad drawing. Squash tail. So your squash tail is essentially a square bottom tail, maybe a little bit of curve right at the end there, so it's not just like a square. And then this gets into a lot of different subcategories in the squash tail. And the one other kind of main tail is the pintail. Now these are all pretty dramatic versions of each of these, but each of these are going to allow you to kind of surf and use the board differently. My favorite right out the gate, and what's on that board over there, the Album Twinsman, and the mashup right here, is the Swallowtail. Now, why the Swallowtail is so great is because it exceeds in smaller conditions. That's why on a lot of surfboards that are made for small waves, you'll see usually the Swallowtail. Now, this is because it has 2 points here and here. And because there's kind of 2 points with the tail, it kind of makes it a little easier to pivot, almost like you're chopping on a skateboard. And each of those points gets the contact in the water, and it digs in and out of the water. Whereas on the other two shapes, you kind of have one main contact point, the tip, and it has to kind of sludge through the water a little more. So there's going to be a little more hold. The Swallowtail is actually going to kind of let you pivot a little more, and it generates speed when there is a lack of speed. And again, that's why on the smaller wave boards, like the little mashup right here, Twinsman, I would say, is actually good on good waves as well. But the fish generally has that swallow tail. The Rocket Wide, the Lost RNF, that shout out boardshop.co.uk just won the board review, whatever thingy. But you'll see that on all the biggest fish models. In the thumbnail, I think it's a 2 fish. But a lot of the Firewires have swallowtails, those thicker Rob Machado type models, because that's classically what goes better in small waves. Now, the Machado Cado does have a squash tail, and why the squash tail is also good on small waves is because it has a flat plane of surface. So actually, even though it is kind of counterintuitive to what the swallowtail is in theory, it can actually drive the board down and through the face because of the flat. It has to be kind of like a flatter, wider tail. So it kind of works a little differently than the swallowtail, but has the same effect of working good in good waves. Now, they'll say the pintail, the rounded pintail, is actually better on bigger waves. I have a longboard back there that has kind of more of a pintail. Now, it's a longboard. Why does it have a pintail? Well, sometimes if the board's big enough, it can actually, I think, be a good small wave shape for a board because it's kind of like the squash tail, but it can be a little more forgiving. The Hypto Crypto has pretty much a rounded pintail. It's not that pinny, but this category of pin and squash can kind of mix in between each other. And I would say the more pinned out it is, the more it is for good waves. That's why GUNs, I'm going to censor myself for these YouTubes, those boards that are really long and skinny, they'll have like a super gnarly pin tail because they just need to like hold and drive through the water. Now, whereas the squash and the swallow are going to be a little bit more pivoty and actually not hold as well, but those help to generate the speed through the water when there's a lack of push from the waves. Now, again, I think the swallowtail is the best tail, not best, because in general, your daily driver boards, they're going to want them to go through mush to gravel, and look at all the models, and they're going to be a swallowtail. I think there was a time for a while where that big fat dumpster diver or Machado Cado tail was more of the go-to tail for gravelers. But what I've noticed is that it's kind of went away. And there was even when you go to buy a board right now, it's interesting because you're going to see a lot of swallowtails. It's pretty much Swallow City. All right, that was another cancelable joke. Just bear with me here. But I think surfboards do kind of getting in the trend department, and they'll, a lot of models will have a certain tail type or a certain shape, and you'll kind of notice that certain boards coming out near each other will be pretty similar, and that'll also be kind of the shape of the boards. And like this board over here, the Pizel and the thumbnail, what is this? The Mini Ghost, I believe. Yeah, so the Mini Ghost. So the internet says this is, a smaller wave board. Now, it is more of a rounded pin. So is it counterintuitive that how are all these boards good for small waves and big waves and all in between? Now, it's just the tail of the board. The tail isn't going to dictate what the whole board does. Now, there's trends that the boards will usually have, whereas a retro fish will have a big swallowtail because it helps move that chunky fish around with the two pivot points. You're not really going to see too often a big fish with a big rounded tail. I mean, I guess the Biscuit did it back in the day. Even when I rode that board, I think this might be more of the fins issue, but I noticed it was very, very quad-like and how it surfed. Now, again, it's probably because it's a Bonzer, but usually the rounded tails are for the bigger waves. And if you have it on a board, like a smaller board like that, it could be a little more sluggish. Now, if that's your kind of style of surfing is just down the line and back and forth and then big round turns, it can work out. But if you want to be really pivoty in the pocket, that's where the swallowtail or even the squash does a better job of just pivoting back and forth. And then also the thickness of the tail. Now I've noticed you'll see the two fish Firewire and even the Machado Cado and the Seaside, a lot of these newer Firewire shapes. I think they do a really good job of making the tail really thin. So as the board comes in, the tail will get a lot thinner right at the end. And that is a big deal because when the tail stays thicker, yes, it could be a little more drivey, but you're going to get a little more caught up when you're bottom turning, the top turning, and you're trying to flick the tail. That flick, a lot of times, works really well when you have essentially the swallowtail. And then the deeper the swallow, sometimes it bites you. The deeper the swallow, it can be a little less flicky because the both parts of the swallow got to go in and out of the water. That's why the mashup, where it has essentially like a super kind of like a really thin swallow, where it's a lot more. It's almost a squash tail. That amount of surface right there, there's not that much area right there, so it when you're riding it, it's funny. The mashup's actually a super unique board, just to dive in really quick, because it has two of these. It kind of dips down here too, like little step rails only on the back of the board. There it is right there. The album's a lot cleaner right now, so it does look better. But these little kind of like indentions where the tail, it'll be up here and then it'll dip down and it gets really rolly, kind of like the album does throughout the whole deck. But what I notice when I'm riding the mashup is it really, you can just like chit chatter your way to success because it is just like, it's like I've never really ridden a board like it. It really is like you're just tapping, tapping, tapping. It's like riding a skateboard back in the day and just tapping. And it's pretty unbelievable how chattery in the back in a good way the mashup is, in terms of like the level of control you can have because of the tail. And it's not a super deep swallow like the typical boards. Even the album has a swallow that's kind of deep, but it's a pretty mini swallow, whereas the two fish on the thumbnail is like a humongous one, like my crappy drawing here. The mashup swallow, it's kind of a mix between the ZBO, and don't want to focus on anything but my face because it loves me. It's because of this, the less craziness of the swallow, I think it actually pivots better and it rides more like a squash than, the deep swallow. Now, there you go. The third joke of the episode. There you go. So you can cancel me, hit thumbs down, cancel, and I'll be on my way. Just joking. But that was really surprising about the mashup because like the swallow was so shallow. And it's funny because when I buy so many of these surfboards, a lot of them are swallows because I'm essentially just buying grovelers. I don't really even own any like standard potato chip thrusters. And you try not to buy a swallow, and it's all the boards have, is because that's what usually a fishy groveler is. But then a board like the Machado Cotto comes out, and it has the classic squash tail, and it's a wide squash tail, which I think there was a short time in the 2000s-ish where that was getting really popular, where the dumpster divers, I think, was one of the first boards to really push that to the limit. Because what Dane did, this was in an interview recently, was Dane Reynolds essentially tried to like cheat in these heats and ride a fishier groveler board. This was back when this was way more naughty, and the judges didn't like that. So he made the dumpster diver to kind of like ride a shorter board that probably could have been a swallowtail, but he wanted to keep it a squash tail to trick the judges and please them, so the scores would be nice and high. Now, I think that style of board is now on the comeback because the Machado Cotto really just sealed the deal, I think, in the fate of what surfboards are going to do for a while. Because when I saw the Machado Cotto, like at the first demo when I saw it, when I was like, "What? I don't even know what board this is. What board is this?" To be honest, it didn't interest me that much because I was like, it kind of looks like a potato chip shortboard, just stretched out wide and long, which just these days you don't see that much anymore. They've almost scared us away from the squash tail, because us servers in the 90s, 2000s, we were so used to squash tail being the potato chip surfboard. So when you see the squash tail on that kind of board, it's similar to the JS, the Crypto. You don't see the pintail that often on a board like that. So it's a little counterintuitive to what you are expecting. So, and I think that's why the Machado Cotto excels, because the squash tail, it's raised it thin towards the back. And that's why it keeps it lively and still maneuverable enough that it doesn't end up being like a baked potato type board where it's a lot more of just like a pushing the water around and working by being so thick in the back and wide that it picks up speed and goes like a boat, but then you can't nimbly move it around. So I thought that'd be super interesting to kind of dive in and dissect a little bit more about these surfboard tail shapes. Now, there's a few others as well, and a lot of times before the tail and what's under the actual board behind the deck, V, double V, single concave, forehand, double, that has a lot to do as well. But the tail in itself is super pivotal in how the board is going to ride, what you want out of the board, etc. So a lot of times it's not just as simple as, oh, it's a swallowtail, that means it's good for small waves. Oh, it's a pintail, it's great for big waves. It has a lot to do with it, but you've seen in these last couple of years, surfboard companies are kind of experimenting with that and how to use a traditional tail that's meant for something and using it for something else. So super interesting. And I think we're going to wrap it up there. I just wanted to quickly jump in, talk about the surfboard tail types. Which one is your favorite? Comment below your favorite tail type, maybe your favorite board tail combo. Do you agree? Do you disagree with this stuff? Am I just, talking out of my A double S over here? Do I know what I'm talking about? Do I not? It'd be great to hear y'all's feedback and what you think about this and your favorite tail type. Again, I'm definitely a swallow type guy. I've been trying to get away from them, but it's hard because I think they just work the best. And in the end, whatever gets in the water, whatever makes you have fun, that's what you should be getting. And it's fun to experiment. And I'd say if you're still in the experimentation phase, your best friends are these websites that have surfboards. There's a new one that just popped up. I want to shout it out because it's pretty cool. It's called Board AI or something. Board Al, or maybe it is Board AI. And it's a new app. I have no affiliation with this. Boardle. It's called Boardle because it's the surfboard portal, I guess. And I'm giving you a free advertisement. But it's pretty much OfferUp for surfboards, and it's pretty new, and it's cool. I mean, there's already tons of boards on here. I'd say between this and OfferUp, it's a no-brainer to try new boards because they're out there. I mean, look, we're already starting to see what I'm talking about. So like the Firewire S-Boss, which is this the mid-length version or is this the just shredder version? It is, yeah. So the S-Boss I think is actually, yeah, it's more like a short board, and as you can see, meant to shred. Kelly Slater shreds it. It is round pin or like pintail essentially. That's a short board. The Boardle also has, here's more of a classic fish shape. And as you can see, swallowtail. The swallowtail will also usually have like a really wide tail before it gets to the end of the board. Whereas the other shapes, usually the board won't be as wide towards the end. It's almost like the swallowtail on a big fish works well too because it gets so wide at the end. They want to give it some mobility at the tail because it's such a wide block at the end. So that swallow really helps it have two pivot points as opposed to one giant end point where the water has to kind of like bounce in and out. Yeah, so shout out Boardle. It's like a new app that's cool, and then OfferUp's great too. But there's tons of boards on here, so if you're still figuring this stuff out, this is a great way to go about it. To get a board essentially half off, and some of these are super new. These are some great deals on here. So, all right, guys, we're gonna wrap it up. Thanks for watching another episode of Hero's Journey live stream edition. Till next time, peace.